Hi, Dr. Melissa Robinson-Winemiller here with another episode of The Empathic Leader, where we talk about all things EQ, empathy, and leadership. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment because that's how we keep the conversation going. And with our definition of empathy, that it's about understanding and connection, we need to keep this conversation going and connecting as far out as we can. You're going to love my guest today. She is amazing. And of course, the first thing I saw off of her website was the tag, I'm committed to helping wisdom bearers become wisdom sharers through writing, speaking, teaching, coaching, and more. And of course, when I read that, I was like, oh, yes, we need to talk to this person because she obviously has her chess pieces in the same place that I have mine. Olivia Parr-Rud, a former data scientist, which as a data scientist, of course, I was like, yeah, let's bring another one on, has embraced her sole purpose. She is dedicated to harnessing the wisdom of elders to change the world. To that end, she guides her clients to access, package, and share their wisdom through writing and speaking. She is an award-winning author, speaker, and host of the Amazing Aging podcast. But there's so much more than that. She has such a depth and breadth of experience and things to bring to the show. And just to give an idea as well, she is an accomplished author, having written the Business Intelligence Success Factors, Love at Work, love standing for L, love all of yourself, O, own your superpowers, V, visualize your goals, and E, engage your tribe, and love the new competitive advantage, among other things. So let's bring her on and let her tell us about it herself. Hi, Olivia.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you on and bring you to our audience because you have so much to talk about. And I can't wait to hear all of it. We were talking before the show and it was like, well, maybe we should save it for the show. And it's like, yeah, I guess technically we could do that. So what I would like, if you don't mind, is just to give our listeners kind of the Cliff Notes version of how you got doing what you're doing now and where you see this going.
Well, it's as you said, I'm doing a lot of different things. So I spent 35, almost 40 years as a data scientist. All that time, I could see the successes and failures of companies based on their culture. And when I first got into the corporate world, I was shocked by the toxic culture. I'd been kind of an earth mom for 10 years, and then I got a master's degree in statistics, and this small credit card bank recruited me. And I thought I'd landed on another planet. I wasn't used to that fear-based leadership. But, I buckled down, I did my job, and I actually left that company, went to one with a nicer culture, and started noticing that things were easier and people loved coming to work. And it became a pattern. I eventually didn't like corporate politics, so I went off and became a consultant, and I worked with a lot of different companies. And this is where I really got to see the differences in culture. And I started doing research. I just was passionate about letting people know, especially with technology and the fast pace of change, that I felt social skills were really more important in many ways than other things. So if you think about it, I don't know, 50, 100 years ago, in a manufacturing company, the CEO could pretty much step in and do the job, but people just weren't high skilled back then. It was simpler companies, everything evolved more slowly. Today, in any company, even the lowest employee has to use a computer. And so employee turnover is a huge cost. All right, so I'm going to just now go back to how you introduced me. So when I retired 6 years ago, I did write a book, Business Intelligence Success Factors, in 2009, really championing all the soft skills in our high-tech, fast-paced global economy. Yes. Continued as a data scientist. And then when I retired 6 years ago, I thought, I'm not done, and I have a lot of wisdom to share. But there's others as well. So I founded Quantum Wisdom Institute, and I started offering little courses in how people could find their wisdom and share it. And that went along pretty well. And then I had a family tragedy, had to kind of take a couple years off. And when I came back, and I'm also relaunching my podcast, the Amazing Aging podcasts where I share wisdom of elders, I was really getting that going again and excited about it. And then I got this opportunity and this insight to actually put something together again for companies around culture. And my partner, who is big in gratitude, and then I wrote Love at Work, which is really about showing if you're loving, basically caring of your employees, you'll make more money. And, you and I have talked about how it can just be so easily proven on the bottom line. And I thought, well, maybe now the time is right. I think the way companies have to be so agile, they can't count on top leadership to do it all anymore. And if they want to empower their employees, they've got to show them love and empathy and gratitude and the whole works. So my partner and I are putting together a program. I'm still going to continue with the amazing aging work and the Quantum Wisdom Institute. It's just fun to be playing in all these areas, which I feel have this kind of cohesion of really bringing out wisdom, whether it's people or organizations. And I will add that I think right now, we all have to show up as leaders, no matter where we are in the company, because of complexity. And that, a lot of times we're doing a job nobody else can do, especially in some of the technical fields. So we have to think like leaders.
Yes. I couldn't agree more. That's why I'm so excited to have you here. Because I talk about that too, how you have to be a leader of one first. First, you have to lead yourself. You have to have empathy for yourself. You have to have compassion for yourself. Because if you don't have these things for yourself, how can you possibly think you're going to have them for anybody else? Exactly. And I think there is a lot of that in leadership as well, that people are in these leadership positions and they feel the weight of all this responsibility and they know they can't do all these jobs and they feel the disconnection, which empathy at its basis is about connection and understanding. So to feel that disconnection can be really difficult, especially if you feel you're in a high spot that's always on stage. It's always under the bright lights. So there's a lot to be said for all of that and being able to bring that love, as you were talking about, into the companies by starting with the self.
Yeah. And I think there was some research, I have it in one of my books. I think it was in Harvard Business Review, where they showed how a manager and his direct report, they hooked up nodes, devices onto their scalp to read their brain waves. And then the manager showed empathy for his employee and their mirror neurons synced up. So this is really scientifically proven that these things matter. I don't think this was even in our realm of science, 50 years ago, but now we're seeing that we live in this field, and I see a company or a family or any group as a quantum field, a field of energy. And I love to give the example of when you watch fish swim together or birds flying together, they're not checking with each other to see which way somebody's turning. They are in the field and they're maybe they're not their mirror neurons. It may be, I'd have to look it up, but that they're in a synchronicity. And then this can be seen. I've heard about gaming conferences where 10,000 people are all synced up playing a game. Or we know in jazz, they've actually studied it with the nodes on the head to measure that these jazz musicians, their brainwaves sync up. So it's really fun to know that that's possible and leverage it, I believe, to make companies more agile and just better places to work.
Well, and it seems to me that the leaders who are willing to embrace this and consider these, fluffy emotions actually are in a great position to be supercharged for the leaders of tomorrow, because the command and control style of leadership doesn't work. We've been stuck with it for way too long, and we've proven it doesn't work. And yet, Daniel Goleman, so the first article on emotional intelligence was written in 1989 by Mayer and Salovey, where they first talked about it, that it's understanding and controlling your own emotions and understanding other people's. Daniel Goleman wrote his book on emotional intelligence in 1995, where he was like, emotional intelligence totally trumps intelligence quotient, EQ over IQ any day of the week. So that means that we've been talking about this now for 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
and we know this to be true. So anybody that can really get a hold of this and move forward with it, they're going to be the leaders of tomorrow that people are going to look at and go, I want to do it like that. Because the command and control style is dead.
Yeah. And the young people today, they don't want to work for leaders like that. So if you want to attract and retain the best employees, you really want to make it a kind of a coaching model where people are inspired and given the resources and championed and being allowed to take risks and make mistakes, because otherwise you're going to just get lost in the competition. I really think it's needed, even just to survive these days. Because if your competitors start embracing this kind of leadership and you don't, I think you're going to get left behind.
Yes, big time. Especially like you said, with the up and coming generations that just aren't willing to settle for what, the other generations before them have. I'm Gen X, and I get upset with some of the stuff that we settled for. I think we should have been leading the way better, but instead there's stuff coming off from the beginning of the century yet,
Yeah.
and it's the other century, not the 2000 one, the 1900s one.
Really?
Which proves
I hope I'm right. I think it was Simon Sinek one time was saying that this was about 10, maybe 15 years ago, complaining that the millennials weren't satisfied with a job unless it had meaning. And I'm going like, no, this is a good thing. We want people to want meaning in their lives. I'll also say around leaders that are command and control, one of my big whys is I think many corporations, they have more power than some nation states. And I think a lot of the time the leaders have trauma or wounding that keeps them from feeling safe. They don't feel safe to be vulnerable or make mistakes. So they just rule by fear. And I actually took many years and studied trauma healing and a lot of quantum release techniques, because I feel like that it's really helped me. And I've been able to help clients just by getting rid of trauma that keeps us from having those feelings available. And I spent a lot of my life in survival. So for me, it was really only maybe in the last 10 years that I've been able to embrace my full set of feelings and feel safe being vulnerable, which I think showing up on a podcast is one example of that, to just be able to talk and make mistakes and be vulnerable.
Oh yeah. And you said the key word there, vulnerable. I mean, it's a scary place to be, but it's also a liberating place to be. And, this idea of being able to connect and understand through vulnerability. I mean, Brene Brown is one of the first ones who've really talked about it, but it is important. And for the leaders, if they're experiencing fear or they're experiencing anger or some of these other emotions, those are empathy blockers. If you are so overwhelmed with fear or anger that it's all about yourself, you can't connect. And so empathy is negated. So, these responses, trauma responses, sometimes insecurity, I've seen a lot of leaders who end up in these top spots and maybe they know that their leadership skills could be better, but instead of learning and growing, they double down on this is how we do it. And it's kind of too bad because that insecurity and fear is keeping them from growing. And it's not everybody, there's no blanket statement that says all leaders do this or all leaders do that. But I have seen that one crop up more than once.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I did a radio show on Voice America back in 2014, 2015, and that channel doesn't exist anymore. I don't know if you can find those recordings. I'm kind of getting them up on my own YouTube channel. But I remember I was interviewing people who were doing really interesting models for change. And one of the things I asked, I said, if you go in and suggest changes to a top leadership team, how do they respond? And they said, almost always there's like a third of them that are like, yes, this is really what we want. We want to be vulnerable and have empowered leadership and just be happier. And a third of them were kind of on the fence, but were coachable. But a third of them basically quit because they just weren't able to give up that fear. And I think those are the most wounded ones, but it's true that, it's a range of what's going on. And I think now more and more leaders are figuring this out because they're watching what's happening and how hard it is to keep up with competition. If, say, the CEO wants to make every decision and every new problem or opportunity has to go all the way up the chain and back down, it's not fast enough. You're going to lose. So for companies to be agile, they really do have to have empathy, empower their employees, and give them the resources and let them know they appreciate them, and leave them alone, let them fly.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to be agile right now, there really isn't another way. Everything else is too cumbersome. Because I was kind of wanting to move us into a little more of the self-leadership side of things, because you are someone who has led yourself through very different stages to come out now to doing what you're doing. And in doing that, what wisdom have you learned through leading yourself and growing into the person that, maybe version 2.0 today and version 3.0 tomorrow?
Wow, that's a really good question, because I feel like I've lived a lot of lives. And as I said, it's only been in the maybe last 15 years that I've been able to open my heart. So as a kid, I lost both my parents very young. My dad died when I was 5 in a plane crash. And then my mother kind of went to work and wasn't available. And when I was 19, I was in a terrible car accident, spent almost a year in the hospital, immobilized, got out of the hospital. My immune system and my digestive system were a mess. And then the next year, my mother died. So here I was in my early 20s, really sick. And I had siblings, but we were all in crisis, really, and couldn't support each other. And so I had to figure out a lot of stuff. And I'll just say, as a kid, I had a hard time reading because my mind would wander, and math came easily. So I just sort of studied, I went into math. And so here I was, and I went back to college, got a degree in math, and just sort of fumbled, but I was good at logic. And I think because math gives you those skills to, or to reason, and then kind of, got married, had kids, and spent 10 years as this earth mom. And then I said, got a degree in statistics. So when I was in college, that's when my mother died. And, so I never did that well in school either. So I had imposter syndrome. I was terrified of speaking in front of people. In fact, one of my early corporate jobs, I could always talk one-on-one, but I wouldn't say a word at meetings. This is true. And one of my managers forced me into Dale Carnegie. He goes, you got to learn to speak, And so it did help, because I realized I was actually pretty good on my feet. Well, interesting. Okay, so I shared earlier how I got into this toxic culture, my first job. I was meditating one day and I got this message. I said, why am I stuck in the corporate world? I just hate it. And I've only ever had this happen once, where this voice I heard say, this is where you need to be to learn the skills to do your real work. All right, so at that time, I didn't know what my real work was, but I was kind of starting my spiritual healing journey. And then, as I said, I got asked to write a book, and I wrote a book, and it became a bestseller. Well, and I really was scared to even write it. In fact, I had all the writer's block stuff. And one night I was in a hotel room somewhere, and I was waiting for some people, and I just said, I'm just going to start typing, and I'm not going to think about it. And then, it'll just get it out of the way, like to get started on this book, because I had deadlines with my publisher. Yeah. Well, I started writing. I wrote a page and a half, and then I went back and I read it, and I went, that's not bad, and I kind of did that, and they were giving me good feedback when I'd send in the chapters. And I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I can write, Well, then it became a bestseller. And one of the risks of that is you get to speak, get invited to speak. That I was one of those people that would rather be dead. The very first time I spoke, I was in San Francisco. I was literally sitting in the back of the room before they introduced me, praying for an earthquake. I was, every cell in my body was terrified. But I had memorized the first 2 sentences, and I kind of made my way up shaking and my knees were knocking together. But I read out the first 2 sentences and people started smiling, and I kind of knew this stuff, and I went through it, and it was like, I got my first speech done and people loved it. And then a young fellow later in the day said he thought it was the best talk of the whole day. And I'm like, oh my God,
Wow.
like I never expected that. So that led to just being comfortable speaking. And then as I got into the greater wisdom work and corporate healing work, I'll call it, I realized those skills are important. So that was why I had to go through that trial by fire. I've never had a single guide. I haven't really had mentors. I've done a lot of reading. Brene Brown, of course, is one of my favorites, and her saying we're all worthy of love and belonging. Because for a long time, I didn't believe that, and I didn't believe I didn't think I had any intelligence. I was afraid of everything, and just partly by having to survive, having to make money. I was married for 29 years. My husband passed away, but during that time, he started getting sick. So I was forced to push myself in my career to kind of pay for the family, the 3 kids. And so I almost think spirit, or, this universal power, God, whatever you call it, put me through these things to get where I am today. And I feel like, okay, now I've got a pretty good grasp. I'm not always comfortable. I still have fears. And I sometimes think, am I an imposter? But I can trust, and this is really key, which kind of came to me in the mid-90s, is my internal voice. And I didn't have that at all until I really went through this dark night of the soul in the 90s. And so I think, if you're out there listening, and this to me is the greatest guide, is to be able to check in with your own wisdom, which I feel I believe we're connected to some universal wisdom. So I try to use that as my guide. And I love having coaches, and I've been in some programs and gotten coaching, but I still always go back to that. Like, is this the right place for me right now? So I hope that wasn't too long of an answer to the question.
Well, no, not at all, because it's a life journey. I mean, figuring out how to lead yourself is an evolving thing, because you're an evolving person. So it changes. Yeah. But I think by understanding how we lead ourselves and how we can bring ourselves to being a better version of ourselves, it helps us know how to lead others as well. There's that empathy thing again.
Yeah. Yeah. I was talking to somebody the other day who was trying to be in a partnership with someone, and she was resisting. And he said, I know I don't love myself. And I thought, well, that's really where you have to start, because I don't think you can love another without loving yourself. I don't think you can have empathy with another or forgive another until you can love and forgive and have empathy for yourself. It's just really clear to me. And so really a lot of the work is self, as you know.
It is. And some of the leaders I've worked with aren't always very happy with that, because what they want is a consultant to come in and fix it for them, or give them a solution, or, do some trainings. And it's like, no, culture drips down from the top. I'm sorry. But until we fix things at the top, this isn't going to fix all of these other things that you want fixed. So they don't always like to hear that, though.
And when we were talking before the show, I mentioned this Campbell soup story, which I think is such a great way to bring it to the dollars, because a lot of people think, oh, this is a nice to have, but it's not necessary. Well, it really is. And so I remember, and this was a while ago, I think it was in the 90s, that Campbell's soup brand was just crashing and the stock was dying. And the company hired a consultant to come in and try to figure out how to save the company. So he spent 6 months and he really just talked to people. And the employee satisfaction rate was in the teens. It was awful. Wow. So nobody was happy. And so he did a lot of talking to different employees over 6 months, a lot of research, and then finally came up with this very simple solution, which was that every manager had to go to each of their direct reports once a day, if possible, and just say, hey, I appreciate you do you have any questions? And, we're something like this, we're so happy you're part of the team. Is there anything you need? What are you working on? Just a few questions like that. Within 6 months, the employee satisfaction rate was skyrocketing. The stock came back up. It was just really, and I feel like these are simple things you can do with friends and family as well. And they help any situation, and it's totally free. I wrote I wrote an article called Love the New Competitive Advantage, which you can get at my website and we can share. But one of the things I start with is, what if there was an app that could increase your profits and bring joy to you and your family and your employees and the world at large, and it was completely free? Wouldn't you want to try it? And then it's love, really. So, or empathy, or, all those pieces. It's just available, but you've got to be vulnerable and authentic. And that's where the growth happens.
Yes, absolutely. Because if it's inauthentic, it actually can do more harm than good. So you can't just go through the motions. That doesn't mean you need to, be over the moon with feelings. It's, there are boundaries there, and this is business and all of that. But just because it's business doesn't mean these things don't have a place, and pretty important, because at the heart of it all, we're humans. We're human beings being human, and that's the way we are. That's how we function, even in a technological age.
Yeah, and I would even add that I believe we, as the human species, are evolving. So I think we're going to a higher frequency, which is really putting even more pressure on us to be in our hearts and to just care for others. I think we're going to what is kind of a love frequency. It gets into more of the science and the quantum physics, but I've just seen evidence, and there's a lot of models, the spiral dynamics and Ken Wilber's model, and Hawkins, if you've heard of David Hawkins' scale of consciousness, and I see young people, like little kids they just seem like they're way beyond where I was at that age with emotional intelligence. I don't know if you've had that experience, but it's been amazing to me.
Well, and even books like you were mentioning earlier with Margaret Wheatley and other people that have brought in this idea of the quantum to actually boost business for better profits, for better productivity. And it's been proven. There was a study done by Ernst & Young in 2022, specifically about empathy. And they proved that having empathy will boost, it was like productivity by 88%, innovation by 87%, and profit by 84%. Yeah, it was such an important study. They did it again last year.
That's amazing. I want to look that up. I actually was into creativity as well. As a data scientist, people kept thinking, well, that's the opposite. Well, actually, it isn't. And one of the reasons my book was so popular is because I came up with creative ways to use statistics to build really great models. And then it occurred to me at some point, I was listening to The World is Flat by Freeman. I forget his first name, but that's an old book, but it's really great about how we're getting, digital, global, virtual, and everything's getting automated. So if you think about it, if all the linear processes, and we know what's coming with AI and robots and everything, you have to innovate to compete, because everything can be automated or outsourced. And really what's left is how innovative are you? And you have to be in a safe, emotionally safe environment to be innovative, because, a lot of companies would dissuade creativity, because if somebody made a mistake, it was doomed. So those companies, I felt, really stagnated because their culture was so fear-based that nobody took risks. Where now, especially in technology, because there's very little capital cost, if they don't have a 97% failure rate, they're disappointed, because that 3% can make them billions of dollars with a new idea. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I think that's a fantastic point, because, it really is innovate and perish. And it's not just innovate, but innovate now and innovate fast. So
that's true.
you know?
Innovate agilely. Yeah. I mean, it really has to almost be, well, I would say it has to be part of the culture. It has to be just a piece of what everybody's thinking about, as well as their deliverables in real time, is how do we make things better? Invite that, reward it, make it fun.
Yes.
And that could be, I remember a story about a guy was touring, I think it was Microsoft, and they saw some guy with his feet up on the desk and headphones on and his eyes closed. And they go, well, that guy's not even working. He goes, oh no, he's working. He's coming up with new ideas.
But that's what actually boosts. I mean, why do the same thing that's already been done?
Exactly. You know? Yeah.
Well, I know you mentioned the love and gratitude stuff that you and your partner, Tom, are doing. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that for our audience?
Well, we've come up with the quantum leadership experience, and we're just fleshing it out right now. It's going to talk about a lot of the scientific models and the hive mind. We're saying about fish and birds, how we can create that in our company. And and we came up with this, what we're calling the GLOW method, gratitude and love for organizational wellness. So there'll be these steps, and we're just playing with whether we want to do a year-long program or maybe have some, and maybe we'll do variations of it, but just have people come in, experience some things, and invite them to explore being more open-hearted and authentic and vulnerable. And my partner and I, we're kind of left brain, right brain, and I've done a lot of training in trauma and release and healing work. My daughter is actually done the same training, and she's better at it. So we're going to have her as kind of a person that's available. So if somebody is in our training and feels a little bit triggered by something or has a fear, they'll have the ability to go in and work one-on-one with my daughter or her partner. She has a partner too that is really good at this. And so we want to make it kind of a holistic experience, and invite people, as well, to look for other types of experiences like this that can really help your company become more agile, and really just a better place to work, like where people love showing up. You know how I talk about how everybody loves to come home and their dog is just so happy to see them. Imagine if you're a leader and when you show up at work, everybody's so happy to see you. That's, to me, the ideal company. And I know there are places like that, but I think we need more of them.
Yeah, because then it comes back. If you as the leader feel supported and that your people have your back, you in turn are going to support them and have their back. So it ends up in a cycle that wouldn't be a bad one to have.
Exactly. I can't think of the company. I'm sure you've heard of it. And I think they sell sports equipment. They're in New England area, where they actually get, whenever there's good snow, the boss closes the company and they can all go skiing. Have you heard about this?
I haven't, but that's brilliant.
It's an older story, so I forget. But anyway, yeah. So to me, that was the kind of culture that he created, and people love working there and love showing up, and had a real good work-life balance.
Yeah. Well, that would be amazing, actually.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fantastic. So let me ask you, where can our listeners get a hold of you?
The best place is my website, oliviapr.com, or I think amazingaging.pro goes to the same place. It's still transitioning because I'm still doing the wisdom work, but I'm going to be putting more in about our leadership experience. But you can always reach out to me, olivia@oliviapr.com. I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts, your needs, just want to chat. Yeah. And I have, on my website, there's links to books. I've done a bunch of ebooks that are really fun to read. They're free. You can grab those, and it just lots of wisdom, I guess, I've gained over the years I share. And I just published a book in December called 77 Secrets to Amazing Aging, because that car accident I was in, I actually ended up finding alternative health in my 20s. And I'm 74 and I actually feel better than I did when I was in my 20s. And so in that book, I share a lot of the secrets that I've used to, I feel, stay younger, looking and feeling. And many of them are good if you're younger to start then. So just leave it at that.
Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure to have you on, and we'd love to have you back. So I have one more question for you that I always end the show with.
Okay.
If you can think of one person, alive or dead, known or unknown, that has influenced you and how you lead either yourself or other people, who would it be and why?
I think about, Meg Wheatley's book, The Leadership in the New Science, had such a powerful influence on this whole journey. But I would, all right, so I'm going to actually say Brene Brown, because of her work on vulnerability, which really helped me bring forth what I feel like I was afraid to do, and make mistakes. Like, to me, she was just a powerful person for giving us all permission to be vulnerable and be okay with things going as they are. So maybe that'll be.
Well, you'll get no arguments from me on that. So, Olivia, thank you so much for being here with us today.
My pleasure.
And many thanks to my audience for listening in for another episode of The Empathic Leader. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. And we will see you for our next show next week. Bye for now.